Welcome to Inside Business Live. My name is Autumn Phillips, Managing Editor of the Post and Courier. Inside Business Live started almost 3 years ago with the idea that we could use conversations with experts and our business reporters to help South Carolina business community make decisions. The Post and Courier has 8 people dedicated to covering business in the state, 6 of them in Charleston and 2 of them in Columbia. If you aren't already signed up, our teams send out an email newsletter every Monday and Thursday morning with a great wrap-up of the latest business and economic news. To sign up, visit postandcourier.com/newsletter-sign up. Today is a collaboration with the Charleston Chamber of Commerce and our sponsors, Kiowa Island Golf Resort, Wells Fargo, and the Satori Group. Thank you for partnering with us. We have a special guest moderator this morning, food editor Hanna Raskin, who is joining business reporter Emily Williams to talk about the labor shortage the restaurant industry is facing even as business is picking up again and it finally feels like we could be on the road to recovery from the pandemic. We have 4 panelists today here to share their insight and experience with us. Welcome Dan Blumenstock, Director of Hotel Operations at Low Country Hotels, Tina Heath Schutenberg, owner of Gwai Way, parent company of Kwai Fei, Daniel Gutentag, Assistant Professor at the College of Charleston, Director of the Office of Tourism Analysis, and Stacy Fraunfelter, Business Development Manager at Spherion Charleston. Welcome.
I think that for us, obviously that was a piece of it early on. I think that what we're feeling now is that a lot of the people that we used to attract have now taken the opportunity while restaurants were closed and retrained themselves into opportunities. And although I think that that's incredible and good on them, I did this, the Kwai Fei is born of, us having opportunities but I wonder kind of what that looks like down the road. There can only be so many real estate agents. So, I think that for me, that's a big piece that I saw because we've been lucky to attract a very qualified candidate.
Good morning. I would say the biggest overarching challenge that sort of underpins everything is just that there's a massive labor hole to fill, that we started this recovery with a huge gap, because if you go back to last spring, we had upwards of like 50,000 people working in lodging and food services throughout the Tri-County area. The COVID hit and the majority of those jobs were lost. So upwards of 50, 55, 65% of those jobs were lost. And so we're talking 25,000 jobs that disappeared from hospitality. And as people were unfortunately furloughed and lost their positions, a lot of them inevitably moved to other jobs in other industries, because at the same time that hospitality was shedding all these jobs, some other industries were still hiring and hiring a lot. So if we think of the big box stores like Walmart and Target, if we think of construction, if we think of Amazon and the supermarkets, all of those businesses were hiring our hospitality workers. And so it was sort of quite foreseeable, for better or for worse, that we were going to find ourselves in this position once all the wonderful vaccine came and we got to enjoy the rebound. So I think that there's a bunch of little different things that are all definitely having an impact, but the challenge is just a ton of openings that everybody is hiring at the same time. We've had hiring challenges and labor shortages have been discussed even pre-pandemic in Charleston. But at that point, it was, a new hotel was opening or a new restaurant. But now it's every single property is hiring basically at the same time. So there's just a ton of demand for jobs. At the same time, a lot of the prior workers have found themselves in other positions and may not be eager to change industries and change jobs once again within basically a 12-month period.
Well, y'all stole all my answers. So, but I think all of those are great points. And a couple things to remember too, with the South Carolina DEW, they've come out with a report month. And last month, there were 8,310 people unemployed. And there were 19,000 jobs open. So you have to remember, not only is it the hospitality industry, this is every skill set that you're competing against. In addition, sorry. In addition, we have to think also about the individuals that have children at home, that they've had to stay at home. The majority of these folks are in a 25 to 30-year-old range. They're college educated in the unemployment realm. So these are not just folks deciding to stay at home. They really do have reasons that we need to look at. They may be caring for a sick elderly person that is no longer able to be in an assisted care living. So there's lots of factors, but I love all their answers.
And actually, I was just going to add one other thing to build on what Dan said about sort of the government and the unemployment insurance. Another place that the government has sort of had an impact is for some places in particular, the sponsor, I guess, Kiowa and Wild Dunes, some of the big resorts, is they would often hire a lot of people on visas, international foreign workers. So on things like H-2B visas, they disappeared for a while, and now the new administration has brought them back. But my understanding, some people may know more than me, is that it's still sort of not at the same pace and the same numbers that we've had before. So certainly some of the bigger resorts are feeling a pinch from that as well.
I'm glad you.
Surveys coming out that show owners definitely believe that's the problem, and workers say that's not what's going on here. Why would the hospitality industry be struggling more with this unemployment, increased unemployment than some others?
Yeah, very good question. And I will say too, I don't think it's the only issue. I agree with everything that's here. One thing we didn't mention was even retirement. So I know we've had several even employees in my hotels that decided during the pandemic that, we were at that stage in life that it was probably time to go ahead and just retire at that point in time. So, there's a big percentage that goes with all those things. But back to your next question, I think that hospitality, as Daniel very well put, you look at the numbers just in general. We also were one of the hardest hit industries throughout the entire pandemic. And so if you look at travel and tourism as a whole, we got hit one of the hardest of all. And so you're exactly right when Daniel says that other industries may have been thriving. I have a good friend that works with Home Depot. And so Home Depot was thriving. See all the people planting in their gardens and things during the pandemic. But that wasn't happening in my hotels. Instead, we were hunkered down and ready to go to take on what we were seeing as far as deficits were concerned.
One of the other points that's come up with why hospitality may be being affected by those benefits is just average pay. That average pay is lower in hospitality, so then that could actually make a difference what you're making on unemployment. So I wanted to ask too, and this could go to anyone, about what we might be seeing in terms of pay changing. Are we seeing wages rise, and do we think that's short term, or is this maybe a longer term change?
I'll answer just again, as a statistic, if someone was typically working a catering event for $15 an hour and they had a consistent pay, they could stay home for $18.90 an hour. So if you think about an individual's pay rate as a waitress or working in a hotel, the pay rates were a much different realm prior to COVID because of the tips and our wonderful hospitality industry. And now the pay rates are something, in addition to even PTO, that we are encouraging a lot of companies to consider budgeting for next year in a different light.
So we run our restaurants a little bit differently than others. We are very much owner operated. I was joking as we walked up that I'm in the dish pit more often than I'm in a situation like this. And I think that because of that, we've always included all of our employees in the tip pool, front of house, and then back of house. And so for us, our cooks have always made closer to $20 an hour. It's a give on the server side, which is where we feel it more. But that we've actually seen really help us through all of this. People have been like, I know that you're also going to you don't make decisions in a vacuum, right? Like everything that we do affects everybody on the team. And so we have been really fortunate in that way. It's been really interesting to talk to other restaurant owners and them be kind of scared to make a change into this world. We're seeing more and more people adopt this model. They are, throwing bonuses at people and doing those sorts of things, which is, scary for us because we're steady and, you can count on this a year from now, 2 years from now. But I think it's great. I want to see the cooks living a good lifestyle and making the money that they deserve. They're a part of the team as well.
Absolutely. So for this to be sustainable and for front of house and back of house to make the money they need, there needs to be more money coming in so that customers really don't like paying more. And you're in the business of selling noodles and tacos, which people are like, so talk to me about how much more people are going to accept in terms of menu prices.
We are actually considering small menu adjustments now, but it's also because of meat pricing. So we're considering shifting our menu switch to even more vegan items for environmental and those prices, which is, separate conversation. I think that all of this is good because it invites the consumer, it forces them to be more educated. You don't get to just dine out and be ignorant of all of the other pieces anymore. And especially in Charleston, it's like our entertainment, it's everything, right? And so I'm not sure, for David and I, we're kind of like, well, we have to keep growing and creating opportunities. I don't have high margin items. And so, well, high margin, but not high dollar, right? So I do have to work a little harder on the marketing side and get more people in, but that's on me. That's not on our team members to accept that burden.
I was just going to add, in terms of sort of increases in costs, it is worth remembering that we're at a point in time where a lot of people, particularly sort of the middle class and up, are actually in an extremely comfortable financial position, and even more comfortable than pre-pandemic, because you had the government stimulus money. And this past year, lots of people have saved a lot of money, unless they were sort of installing gardens or what have you. People weren't necessarily going out and doing big trips last year and going to restaurants as much. And now there's more. I mean, I have a couple of small kids. I'm about to get money for having kids. It's like, okay, great. I can go use that to buy tacos. So I think there is opportunity there potentially to increase some costs on the consumer in a way that they'll accept it, perhaps more than they would have, a year or two ago, pre-pandemic.
Simple economics. Our costs go up, we're going to have to come up with it somewhere. And so for me, we look at where we're at. We talk this term called ADR, average daily rate. And so when you're looking at the rates that we're charging in our hotels, also in our restaurants, I have restaurants in some of my hotels, our cost of goods has gone up. So whether it's the cost of poultry, whether it's the cost of pork, those things then will drive menu prices up just naturally. It's a natural progression. As my labor cost goes up, the exact same thing will happen to my average daily rates. It's going to drive those rates up. Do I think that it's short term? Do I think that it's long term? I think it's long term. I think if you look at what we're looking at from a country, if you look at what we're looking at from our industry as a whole, those things, the costs are not going down upon us. If anything, they're going to be steady or continue to rise. So I think then when we're looking at the consumer, we're looking at the consumer to say, hey, I'm used to now paying, if I maybe paid $100, just using round numbers, typically in a hotel, I might be now more comfortable that I'm paying $200 for a hotel. And that becomes more of the norm now.
Yeah, I feel like, at least personally, I haven't these things in so long that I kind of forget what they cost. And I feel like some other people might be in that position. I wonder if both you, Dan, and Tina can speak to how you're seeing, if you have some staffing shortages, if you've dealt with that, how that plays out in a hotel, in a restaurant. How does that perhaps affect the consumer? Tina, let's start with you.
So many ways. It's kind of funny because when we were first organizing, we were staffed and it was just glorious for those like 2 weeks. And then, the bottom falls out because all of a sudden it's like this domino. Somebody has a family emergency, another person. So we are very much shorthanded now. We, a couple of months back, kind of looked at our team, exhausted. We're busier than we've ever been, aren't we lucky? And we made the decision to close 1 day a week. It was either we hire more people, we go to 7 days a week, we add 4 services. So we're adding brunches, Saturday, Sunday, and opening on Sunday for dinner. Or are we closing 1 day a week? And it's hard, as you're looking at it and you're, like I said, you're selling noodles, but you're like, I can't do this to these people. I can't look at this awesome team that has stuck with us for this past year and be like, I just need you to work a little bit harder for like 6 more months, I can't do it. So we made that decision. David and I pick up the slack. A lot of times it's tricky when you're running multiple venues. I also own a clothing store. We own Micho, we own Coife. I am, I'm supposed to be 3 places tonight. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But, we stay true to sort of what we're doing, and the right people generally tend to show up, but it is a lot of networking, and it's, really a hustle for us to make that team come together.
Yeah, I think that very, very well said. And, from a hotel perspective, I'll just speak to my hotel group. I could hire 66 people today is what I have needs across 7 hotels here in the Charleston area. And so the good news behind that is that a month ago, I needed 86 people. And so, maybe the trend is in the right direction. We're seeing small increments of that. We mentioned wages earlier, by the way. I do think that's going to be a sustainable growth in our industry as a whole. But also, yes, there's a wide range of entry-level positions, and then there's also experienced positions. And so we have very lucrative department manager salaried positions that are open even now, and not just my hotel, others. From a service standpoint, I'll just speak pretty bluntly on the hotel side of things. During the pandemic, we had to remove ourselves from guest rooms and what we call stayover service, meaning that if you're coming in and you're staying more than 1 night, we're not servicing your room. And it was a health decision at that point in time. Well, we still are not doing stayover service, but it's no longer because of a health issue. It's now because of a staffing issue. So we had to make the choice, what's the least impactful to our guest and to our client that's coming in. And so I'd much rather provide the clean and sanitized room that's the guest that's checking in, but not service that room until they've checked out. And I think for the most part, when we've communicated that to our guests, they understand that and they recognize that is a need that has to happen. So it's a very difficult and delicate balance, though, because there are expectations, as you mentioned, Emily, that maybe pre-pandemic, when you were traveling maybe more frequently, and now you get back to travel and you go, wait, what is this? Wow, nobody's going to come into my room and touch anything while I'm not here. And we're having to explain that now to a traveler that's getting back into the travel industry with us.
And Dan, out of curiosity, do you anticipate keeping that change indefinitely, or once you get the labor, do you expect to sort of go back to servicing the rooms every day?
I can tell you from now to the end of the year, I don't see a change in that whatsoever. And I actually am personally working with all of our brands that we franchise out on various ownership panels and things of looking at this, influencing it for the long term also, and seeing how it can impact it.
Dan, do you also find too, sorry, I have a question for you. With your occupancy levels with your hotels, are you restricting in some ways? I know one of the challenges we've seen in some other hotels is they've restricted the level of occupancy just so that they can handle at the best possible service level for what they're able with their staff. And then we're also seeing a lot more of a ravenous transient instead of corporate groups. So there's a lot more room service detail.
Yeah, great question as well. I really like what Tina said about her team, and I'll brag on my team as well. They stuck right there with us throughout the pandemic. And so we're very proud of the people that we have on staff. So fortunately for my hotel group, we have not had to restrict our occupancy levels. But I do know of friends of mine in the business that have had to make that very tough decision. And when they say restrict occupancy, what that means is that we'll put actually floors of rooms maybe out of order. And so we don't sell those rooms for that night. And so we've restricted how many rooms we can even rent. So that actually increases demand if you think about it from Daniel's perspective. And he's looking at the data entry points and he's going, okay, Well, if you had a, 200-room hotel that's reduced down to 100 rooms now, it's a whole different mindset on what you're able to occupy it at. I think that when you're looking at our employee engagement, that's what it really does come back to, is how our employees and things have really stepped up to those challenges. So we've done very similar. We've tried to create opportunities for our team to have incentives in place and things like that, so that way they're incentivized for the work that I've got from my internal people. Yes, I'm still looking for the external, but I want to be able to make sure and take care of my internal people.
Well, can you just elaborate a little bit on how you're taking care of people? We've talked about the pay increase. One of the things that's often said in the food and beverage community is when we talk about the missing workers or the labor shortage, we have to keep in mind that there was no workforce that was as affected by COVID, and keep in mind that some of these people died. I mean, we lost people. And I heard frequently from people who called and said, our dishwasher died. I mean, I just think it's really important that we commemorate that and honor that, and think too about what are you doing in the industry to make people's work lives better besides just paying them more?
I'll take it. Well, I think for me, I'm going to talk about our company. It comes down to pre-pandemic. It's not that I'm doing really a ton of things different post-pandemic. We're in the hospitality industry. And so when we take and greet a guest that's coming in, we do the same thing with our internal people, because that's my other guest. I have internal guests and I have external guests. My external guest is the person that's you when you travel. My internal guests are my employees. So our employee luncheons that we regularly hold, we still hold. We had to stop during the pandemic because we didn't know if it was safe to have a group of people in a room together. So we had to pause those types of things. So we have those types of celebrations. We celebrate the high level of guest satisfaction scores that we were able to get. We celebrate our employees through some incentives that are mentioned on TripAdvisor. So we are continuing to engage with all of the things that we did pre-pandemic and continuing those now in the post-pandemic realm. So maybe I'm naive in this comment, but I again would ask you and say, you could go to my team right now, and I think if you surveyed my team, that we would have a very high, I'll call it guest satisfaction, as in employee satisfaction within our hotel group. And so we want to be able to continue that because we're a family unit. We continue to operate in that same mentality day in and day out.
Dan, I think that's an awesome culture that you've created. And it's a great point that a lot of folks, this is a great time for you to reset your culture within your organization. The number one easiest and least expensive thing that you can do is thank your employee for coming to work every day. You have no idea what it took for them to get up and get to work that day, whether it was childcare or a sick person or just all the obstacles they face. Thanking them and making them feel appreciated for what they do for you is the easiest thing you can do.
I'll jump in for a last little bit. We obviously closed some and have reduced how many guests we take each night, just to kind of make sure that we can meet expectations, but also not run everybody ragged. And we also do quarterly employee parties and do silly staff photos that look like yearbook photos. So our thing is, we kind of go a little bit wild and silly. But during all of this, David and I have also been able to have really personal interactions with the team and made sure to sit down and have a lot more conversations with them. It's the beauty of having, less than 25 employees is I can give them that time, and I can kind of, somebody was having a hard time. I went out and bought gift cards for them to make sure that they, to meet some needs, and just maybe they had one day where they didn't have to stress. Just a reprieve from the chaos of life. And those are the sorts of things, as we walked into last year, we were growing, and we're kind of an established restaurant headed into our second year. We're like, okay, healthcare, we're going to be one of those restaurants that's going to do it. Obviously that took a hit, but that is the goal for 2022, hopefully late 2021, is to figure out, even if it's some sort of wellness benefit, how can I provide some of those little things for them?
excuse me, you mentioned healthcare. Daniel, I was wondering if you could speak to, I know that some of the recent hospitality specific job fairs that the CVB has put on, you surveyed some of those job seekers and asked them about what they're looking for in an employer, and then also surveyed employers, asked them what they think job seekers are looking for. So I was wondering if you could speak to those priorities and maybe if there were any mismatches between what employers think those job seekers want and what they actually want.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the most part, what the employers expected the employees would be looking for was consistent with what the potential employers were saying, but absolutely there were some differences. Probably what everybody expected was accurate, which is that the top thing that was expected and that the employees or the potential employees indicated was competitive wages. That was number one on everybody's list. But then on top of that, there are some other things. One of the big ones that the potential employees indicated was very important that was sort of underestimated by the employers was parking and commute time. So we know that that's a challenge here in Charleston with the bridges and such, that when we asked the potential employees, like, how far are you willing to commute? The average was 30 minutes. And that was more important to them in addition to free parking, which is going to be particularly important here on the peninsula. So those two things, commute time and parking, were very important to potential employees, more so than what was expected by the employers. Then, of course, vacation time, health insurance, those things were seen as important. But another place where the employees indicated greater importance than what was expected by the employers was paid sick leave. I think that's just sort of firstly top of mind for a lot of people right now as we're coming out of a pandemic. And if you got sick, or even maybe if you were just exposed to somebody and had to quarantine, all of a sudden you could be losing a significant amount of wages. So I think potential job seekers are very sort of acutely aware of that right now. And while hopefully everybody's vaccinated, that as we've been sort of rolling out the vaccine and people have been getting it, I think that some employees have been concerned that, oh, I'm going to go get vaccinated, but then I've heard these stories of people who get like laid out for 2 days after getting the shot in their arm. And the last thing I want to do is get my vaccine and then miss 2 days of work and lose wages. So that on top of sort of coming out of a pandemic, I think is important. And so sort of, I think, underscores this point, which is we've talked a lot about wages, and wages sort of probably undoubtedly are that sort of key factor. And I agree, we're going to see wage inflation, and I agree that that's going to be permanent. But from the employer's perspective, I think it's important to, one, understand, as you'd mentioned, that you're not just competing with hospitality, you're competing with all sorts of other industries who are seeking the same workers. And think of your job offer or your job opportunity as more than just wages. You know, it's all the things you guys have been talking about. It's the culture, but it's also the package of benefits or amenities, or however you want to describe it. And that's how the job seekers are really evaluating these opportunities. And we're at a point where they have lots of opportunities to choose from. So they're really going to look at it very holistically.
Just want to follow up on that, Stacy. So that's really interesting information about what's expected from the employer. I'm also interested in what the employer expects from the employee. I think we talked earlier about, will there be scaling back of drug testing? Will there be more, I hear a lot of like young kids want, people are looking about hiring teenagers. Are they going to hire someone who just got out of prison? Food and beverage has always been a great pipeline for folks to get back into society, but we also know that that's counterbalanced by concerns of other workers who are like, I, as a woman, don't feel safe in this dish room that's staffed entirely by guys that just got out of prison, So help me understand what we're going to expect from employees.
I think there's a lot of folks that are looking for a second chance, and there are opportunities for them in certain employer situations that make sense in specific cultures. I don't know that sometimes hotels is not always the best area just because of the safety and regulations with even the corporate level of the hotels. But there are a lot of folks too that just are looking to go into a different realm, and this hospitality industry has a lot of opportunities for that.
Have you had luck with folks who don't come from a traditional hospitality background? I mean, obviously people are going to have to broaden their search if they want to fill out those ranks.
Yeah, so that probably leads me to something that we've been doing now is trying to think a little differently. And so through our Convention and Visitors Bureau, we have actually been holding job fairs. You've probably seen that publicized. I think, Emily, you actually wrote about it. And so, we've said, okay, we need to do something different though. And so one of the most recent things that we've did is we partnered with several HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, for an internship program. And so we currently have 13 interns that are currently in the Charleston area that are working now. And we fully expect that that's probably going to grow over the next few years and be able to expand into something much larger than that. But even if it's not larger, the fact that we've got 13 individuals that are now learning this trade that would have not been here before. And it took a lot of partnerships through a lot of businesses and a lot of entities in the Charleston area in order to make that happen. Most recently, we actually reached out to the next younger generation. It's called Opportunity Internships, and that was through Senator Tim Scott's office. And so a lot of the Title I schools participated in that. We hired 6 to 9 individuals just in my company alone. And there were 15 companies, I want to say, that were there. And these are high school juniors and seniors. And so you're getting down into the high school ages and being able to put them into our industry and look at, hey, is there a career path for this later on? Because fact of the matter is that there are a lot of high school graduates that don't go off to college either. That's not their kind of MO. And you know what? The hospitality industry is a great industry in order to welcome them in, because through work experience, we can actually train and educate in that manner, hands-on experience, and be able to grow somebody into that. And then lastly, we've had apprenticeships for some time. And I know we're working on getting that actually reactivated, and that's through Trident Technical College. And the apprenticeship programs, we've seen this in Europe for years, especially in manufacturing world, but now it's coming into the hospitality world even stronger than before. We've had a few people in the past, but now I think that's going to grow even bigger. So that gives kind of that, again, high school student that typically would not necessarily be like an athlete or somebody like that, because they don't have the time for the apprenticeship. But it puts them to have a signing day themselves and sign on, be able to engage with our companies and be able to say, hey, I can go to school and go to work, get some real life experience here, and then maybe continue that on. They get college credit, by the way, while they're doing that. And then they go on maybe to a technical school such as Trident Tech, and then they can expand on that. So you're correct. It's created an opportunity for us to think a little differently, reach out to some different individuals, even in the Charleston area. And I think this could go even beyond Charleston.
And just on that internship program that you mentioned with HBCUs, just because I've been talking to people about that this week. So that is more for getting those students on a leadership track, right? Possibly a management track. And you spoke a little bit to this, and maybe Stacy, you could speak to this as well. We know we need a lot of entry-level hourly positions, but are there a good amount of management opportunities available right now?
Yes. There really are. If you were to go on Indeed right now, I guarantee you're going to see probably hundreds of management roles, not just hourly roles. And sometimes it could even be maybe an entry-level manager, maybe a shift. I like what was said earlier about people changed industries during the pandemic. That is so true. I know of people in my company that did the exact same thing. They just self-reflected maybe for a little while and said, hey, we're going to make a shift. But then recently, I know we've brought some people on board that are doing the exact same thing, but they're shifting to hospitality. So I think there's some real opportunity there for us to look at this and say to the general population, we have some opportunities in hospitality that you may be able to connect the dots from whatever life experience that you have. It may connect into our hospitality realm.
I'm glad you mentioned Indeed, because I've heard from every restaurateur, like, this is where I advertise. They all seem to be on Instagram. I'm curious what, for each of you, if there's one tactic you've either exercised or seen that's actually getting people to come to an interview.
I'll answer to that. Actually, we have put a lot of posts recently on Facebook, and the number one response of getting the return that you want is immediately responding to the individual on Facebook within a very short period of time and saying, thank you for applying. We can't wait to see you. Please come in, and this is how you do it. And they immediately respond back, thank you for your quick response. The response is something that they're not getting from the employers, and we need to be literally standing on top of it and making sure that they get that response. And also, just another note on the internships and the leadership, defining coachable moments is my favorite saying, in finding those situations as employers where we can look to these individuals, no matter if they are 18 or 25. These are the individuals that we need to bring up into our leadership roles, and we do need to train, and we really do need to find those coachable moments.
Yeah, I'm not hiring anybody, so I don't really belong. But since you asked all of us to speak, I'll go ahead and take the opportunity to plug my department, which is feel free, if you're an employer looking to hire people, reach out to the hospitality and tourism department here at the College of Charleston, because we have access to massive lists. We have a huge email listserv for our current students, for our alum, and it's a great way. So please, please take advantage. We love to find great opportunities for our students and our graduates and help you out in that way.
We do. We do all of the traditional Indeed and Facebook. But I think because we focus so much on company culture, we look to our team as well to help recruit. We have at times offered a bonus to someone who is able to recruit someone into the team that stays 3 or 6 months, kind of depending on what the market is. We haven't had to do it recently, but we did in the early days. And so we do find that being on Instagram, and we let them wear Hawaiian shirts on Wednesdays and listen to Jimmy Buffett, and so they love posting about that stuff. So they're organically recruiting for us all of the time.
I also want to note, make it easy for them to apply. That's the hardest thing that we keep forgetting. My favorite, I saw recently, Taco Bell had on a sign, just text burrito if you want a job, which I thought was amazing. But I mean, it's just that easy. Like, you put it out there, if you want a job, this is how easy it is. The QR code is a really big thing. You think about the individuals and that age range, they're very tech savvy, and you need to be as tech savvy as an employer.
And is there anything that you're finding that's getting someone to say, I'm not going to apply? Any of those things to avoid, or any of those things that seem to be maybe turning off a potential employee?
I think we hit it on the head earlier with the number one thing that individuals are looking for right now, and they're very motivated by, is the pay rate. The second is the location of the job and how far of a distance. Again, I don't have my stats with me now, but if you look on the SCDO website, you'll find the majority of individuals coming in for hospitality jobs are coming in from Berkeley and Dorchester counties. So they're commuting into Charleston County for these jobs. And we need to remember that those are different counties and different areas. I think the other challenge is, and I will say it out loud, is the drug tests. Because we do have a lot of CBD and all the things, that marijuana is a big thing right now. And a lot of individuals are just not willing to overcome that.
Is it up to the individual, or is it up to the company? You think some companies are going to drop that because
I think it is illegal in the state. And so an individual may choose not to take a drug test or and they can't take the job. There are some companies that are looking aside from that, because of the hospitality industry has been known for that. So, but I think that the key is they're making sure that the actual individual is not impaired enough to do the job, and that they're in a safe space in their environments.
I know we're going to go to the audience in just a moment, but just one last question kind of to wrap this portion of it up. Obviously, I am somewhat pessimistic about all this. I remember probably 2 weeks into the pandemic, I was like, they're never coming back. They're never coming back, because I, like many of you working in the industry, was eating dinner at 7 o'clock. Like, it was amazing to get a full night's sleep. And as soon as the pandemic started, I actually did a story at that time, surveyed workers across the Charleston area, be like, are you going back? You're not going back. No one's ever going back. And obviously things evolve, but I am curious what you think. Perhaps you're not as pessimistic as I am, each of you, when you think we will be past this, if we will pass it, and if it will have any lasting effect on how restaurants look and function. I think right now, every customer is is highly aware of this shortage. They know they can't get a table. And when they do, they are going to wait 45 minutes for their appetizer. Like we all know. So is this going to have, so yeah, how long will this last? And will it have any lasting effects beyond the current crisis?
I'll answer the elephant in the room. We have no idea how long because we are not certain how the vaccine will affect with COVID. And I think that that's one thing that we're going to continue into the fall with. Individuals are becoming a lot less scared of being able to travel, but I will say a lot of folks are staying within the United States and traveling because they're not going outside of the country. And we are going to see more people coming in. Is the hospitality industry going to come back as far as individuals coming to it? I can't answer that.
So I would say in terms of how long this is going to last, I think we're definitely going to come out of this, at least getting back to the point that we were at pre-pandemic. Again, acknowledging that labor shortages are still an issue and there was some tension there, but nothing like it is now. I'm confident that, you know, COVID and the pandemic, it was just sort of like a great disruption and a reshuffling and readjustment. And now it's just taking time for everyone to get resettled back into like a state of equilibrium. So I'm confident that we are going to get back to that point. And the other thing worth mentioning in terms of, you know, people aren't coming back, I think it's worth acknowledging that on the one hand, hospitality stands out as the industry with the sort of the labor shortage that's getting the most attention, and it's certainly the biggest. It's not the only industry, but it is the biggest and it gets the most attention. But at the same time, getting back to sort of how I began, it's because the hole was so big, and you're actually seeing when you look at the numbers, either at the state level or the national level, the newest monthly job numbers or whatever, that hospitality is bringing in and hiring more workers than any other industry. So it's not as though there isn't tons of hiring going on. It's just the starting point was in such a deep hole to dig out of. Then in terms of your last question of, are there going to be some permanent adjustments or changes because of this? I think certainly the answer is probably yes, although I may be the least knowledgeable to answer that. But I would expect that there are going to be some operational changes that, you know, between the pandemic as restaurants and hotels, et cetera, got used to operating in different ways and experimenting with different things and finding new efficiencies of having fewer workers. I would assume that some of that is going to be maintained. And then because I do believe that the wage inflation is permanent, another thing we saw is a new adoption of technology. Right. So more automation and sort of no contact, more technology sort of replacing the human touch. And I would expect that this is going to sort of accelerate that process as we're seeing wages go up and labor being harder to find and technology getting cheaper, that maybe you're going to have businesses that say, oh, I used to operate with 20 people, but I can, you know, now operate with 18, right? You know, like you go into McDonald's and you have the kiosks in some locations where you can order. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Again, Dan could probably answer this 100 times better than me, but maybe hotels that say, oh, instead of having 3 people at the front desk, I'm going to have 2. Instead of 2, I'm going to have 1, and I'm going to have technology to help with the check-in and check-out. So I don't think this is the only thing. That was a process that was probably ongoing, but having the pandemic and sort of having to adapt to that environment, and then on top of that, now coming out and having the labor shortage, I imagine it's going to accelerate that.
I'm sure it'll come back. I think that all the changes have been great. I mean, what a horrible reason to have to sort of look at yourself and look at how you operate and rethink things. But what it created and what people were able to pull from and innovate and change and recognize where there were shortcomings, how awesome. Like, what a quick way to get there. I will never walk into my day the same. You know, being an entrepreneur, you want like the challenge, you know, where is it and can I go for it? And I don't mind a nice night of sleep either, but those don't happen that often. And so I think that, you know, and that's why we were up last year, you know, so we fought for it. But I think, when will it come back? I don't know, but I also am fine with the change.
Dan, you actually did a really good job answering that. So you have to give yourself some credit there. You know, I'm self-proclaimed optimist. And if you look at this situation, it's very similar to any other situation that we have in our industry. Look at here in Charleston. We deal with hurricane scares just about every single year. We make it through. We dealt with severe challenges after 9/11. We've made it through. If you look back over the past years and all the different things that we've had, we had a recession that we came out of. We made it through. So all of those things tell me that even through this pandemic and the labor shortage that we have now, that we're going to make it through it. I remember reading a book called The No Complaining Rule. And one of the philosophies in that book talks about the fact that you don't complain about something, you have a solution for it. And I feel like the hospitality industry does this very naturally, that we constantly are looking at different situations and then we start coming up with ways that we're going to be able to chink away at it and be able to solve what it is that we're challenged with. So for me, I think we're going to come out stronger. I think everything we've talked about today has been very healthy because it's reality of where we're at right now. But ultimately, we are already and have been putting into place things that are avenues and ways to be able to recruit and also to be able to allow some people outside of our industry to know that there's some real opportunities within the hospitality industry.
All right, so anyone in the audience have a question?
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you referenced the book. I'm an optimist also. In 2015, the best business book of the year winner was Rise of the Robots, Technology and the Threat of a Jobless Future. One of the things that Martin Ford said in the book was everybody's going to do everything right, but more than likely it's not going to be right for the new economy. 2015. Steve Gallo just wrote a book, November, Post-Corona. He said everything that was going to happen has been accelerated. So as you're speaking of e-commerce, all of the automation, artificial intelligence has accelerated everything. So we have to look at how are we making these adjustments and also being a little bit more prepared to make these adjustments with the artificial intelligence, e-commerce, and everything else. Thank you.
I'll respond to that by saying, if we could find out the artificial intelligence that will clean my hotel rooms, then we are on the right path. But actually, a couple quick points on technology. You know, technology does have a way of really enhancing a guest experience also. And so, you know, Hilton, for example, I can only speak to probably a lot of my brands that we franchise through, but, you know, Hilton has had self-check-in on the app for a long time. You don't even have to stop at the front desk. You can get checked in, go straight to your room. What it did do is accelerated companies such as IHG that had the technology starting out, but it fast-forwarded the execution and the implementation of those types of things. So I'll stop there. There's many more examples out there, but that's one really good example where it accelerated those things to come to market a little bit faster instead of slowing it down.
And just to piggyback on that and what I was talking about earlier, I think hospitality is sort of a unique industry in that, in the sense that there are some jobs that may be replaceable with technology, but on the other hand, it sort of goes against the core ethos of hospitality, right? I mean, and some of that is just customer segmentation, that some customers care and some customers don't. And I think, again, you go into a McDonald's and you order at the kiosk and you don't really care, but you're not going to go to Hall's Chop House and want to order on a kiosk. You expect the hospitality. So I certainly don't want to imply that, you know, the workers are going to disappear and people aren't going to continue to want the hospitality, because I think 100%, while we are going to see some changes in new technology adoption, that the human touch is a critical part of this industry, and that's never going to go away.
Good morning. My name is Alex. Thank you guys for doing this panel. And I know we talked about a lot of potential solutions in terms of solving this hospitality and finding employee crisis. But if there's one change that you think could make the biggest impact that could be implemented like today, what do you think that change would be?
A subway system in Charleston.
You know, I think we laugh about that, but there is some truth to that. And it's that sometimes it takes so long in order to implement something such as the Low Country Transit System that is looking at, and that's a transit from Somerville to downtown Charleston. Daniel hit the nail on the head when it talks about the location. I think actually you mentioned it as well. So, you know, one of the things, I've got hotels across the region from downtown Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, Somerville. And number one question that even I personally ask to someone is, where do you live when we sit down? I look at their address because I want to start talking about a hotel maybe that's near their home, because I know if they're going to drive from Somerville to Mount Pleasant, that's not going to last very long. They're going to get frustrated with that. They think that they want to do that, but once they get into the midst of it, it's not going to work out well. But if you think about it from a governmental entity standpoint, you can go across all of our different municipalities. Everybody has talked about this, to have some type of workforce housing within their districts, within their city limits, so that way they can walk to work, bike to work, and things like that. That was one of the beautiful things pre-pandemic. We opened a hotel, 250-room hotel in Somerville in the Nexton area. And so within 2 days of having a job fair, I had a full staff, hired 100 employees in 2 days. I wish we could get those days back. But the point behind that is because now we were talking to people that were going to live 5 and 10 minutes away from where they lived, instead of working 45 minutes away from where they live.
Well, I think that wraps up everything. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. Thank you, Hannah and Emily, for moderating. Special thanks to you all for joining us today, and those that joined us virtually. We will be archiving this event, so this will be on postandcourier.com Inside Business Live. We want to say a special thanks to the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce. We did this for the first time in collaboration with them as part of their Business Doing Better series, and we're so thrilled to have partnered with them. I want to thank Wells Fargo, Kiowa Island Golf Resort, the Satori Group for being our sponsors, and we also want to thank College of Charleston for being an amazing host this morning. We do these Inside Business Live events every quarter. We always love to hear feedback from you on what topics you want to hear about. We try to pick topics that are relevant, and obviously this one is very important today. So thank you again, and we hope to see everybody real soon.